Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members, guests and officers to the meeting. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Scrutiny Commission, Monday the 15th of March. As is usual, this meeting was being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. I can confirm that all members of the Scrutiny Commission and officers presenting today are joining online. Before we go any further, can I now ask members to introduce themselves? There is one substitute today. I'll just hold while Mr. Bill's. Oh, it's finished. Right. There is one substitute today, and that is Bill Licorice. Mr. Licorice is substituting for Dan Harrison. So, if we start with Mr. Barclay, please.
Good morning, Chair. My name's Tom Barclay. I'm County Councillor for Syston Ridgeway.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Bedford.
Thank you. I'm the Peter Bedford, the County Councillor for Markfield, Desford and Thornton, and one of the 4 Scrutiny Commissioners.
Thank you, Peter. Mr. Bill.
Morning, everybody. David Bill here, representing Hinckley Hollycroft.
Thank you, David. Mr. Bolter.
Morning all, Bill Bolter representing South and West Wixton.
Thank you, Bill. Dr. Einan.
Terry Einan, County Councillor for Coalville North and one of the 4 Scrutiny Commissioners.
Thank you, Terry. Dr. Feltham.
Hello there, Kevin Feltham here. I represent the Gartree Division and I'm Chairman of Health and Overview Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Kevin. Mrs. Fryer.
I think Mrs. Fry is having some technical difficulties this morning that we're just trying to resolve, and she'll join us as soon as she can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bill Licorice, Mr. Licorice.
Hello, Chairman. Bill Licorice, representing Broughton Division and standing in for Dan Harrison, as the Chairman said.
Thank you, Bill. Mrs. Page.
Good morning, everybody. Rosita Page here, Vice Chairman of the Scrutiny Commission.
Thank you, Rosita. Mr. Pearson.
Alan Pearson, County Councillor for Melton West, Chair of Transport and Environment.
Thank you, Alan. Mr. Richardson.
Terry Richardson, representing Narborough and Whetstone Division.
Thank you, Terry. Mr. Wyatt. Michael Wyatt, are you with us?
I don't think Mr. Wyatt's logged on, Chair.
Okay, right, thank you. Right, so just go back to Mrs. Fryer. Shall we assume that she's not got online yet, and we'll continue and hopefully she'll be able to join us?
Yeah, I can't see that she's joined at the moment, so yeah, I suggest we continue. Thank you.
Okay. Right, just to remind officers and members to mute their microphones until they wish or invited to speak. If you're able to use your video camera, please turn that on for the duration of the meeting. If members or officers wish to speak, can you please use the raise your hand function and avoid using the chat facility. And I'll come to you as soon as I can. Right, so going to the agenda, item 1, the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Are you all happy with that?
Agreed.
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 Right, item 2, question time. And yes, I have received a question from Mr. David Campbell Kelly, Chairman of the Willoughby Waterleys Residents Association. Question received under Standing Order 34. Mr. Campbell Kelly has joined the meeting online this morning. Welcome, Mr. Campbell Kelly. Can you hear everyone okay?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can.
Good, good. Right, everyone should have a copy of the questions and answers, so these can be taken as read. I would remind members that there's no discussion on the question. Mr. Campbell Kelly, as there were 5 elements to your question, you can now ask 1 supplementary question per part. We do have some officers in attendance who will be able to answer these today. And if it's not possible, we'll provide a written response after the meeting. Please note your question should clarify the responses given and shouldn't raise any new issues. Now, I am aware a short while ago that you do have some supplementary questions. I've got a copy of those, but you will need to read those in so that other members are fully aware of them. So I understand, to start with, you've got a supplementary question to the answer to item 1.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Would you like me to ask the questions individually rather than all 5 together?
Yes, I would. Yes, we'll do them one at a time and get you an answer.
Thank you very much. At Harbour District Council's Cabinet meeting on the 8th of March, it was agreed to amend its support for the Strategic Growth Plan, and it gave its approval to the review that is already being undertaken by the Members' Advisory Group. Do the County Council accept that this review, in the light of the changed circumstances regarding the A46 Expressway, and given that the MAG is a non-statutory body, should be the subject of a public consultation in the interest of transparency? Thank you.
Okay, so that's the supplementary to your first question. Now, I understand we've got Tom Pennell with us this morning. Are you here, Tom?
Yes, morning, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, are you able to provide an answer to Mr. Campbell Kelly on his first supplementary question, or would you rather do a written response by me later?
No, I'm happy to provide a response now.
Okay, carry on, please.
I haven't seen what was agreed at Harbour District Council's Cabinet last week, as their minutes aren't on their website yet. The meeting was only last week, so I'm not able to comment on what they have resolved. But the facts are that the MAG has decided to carry out a strategic programme of work to decide whether the strategic growth plan needs updating. It will be for the constituent authorities, i.e. the members of MAG, advised by the MAG, to then decide whether the SGP is updated and what public consultation is undertaken.
Okay, so there's a review into whether there's a need for a review.
Yes, I mean, the MAG doesn't use the word review. It's undertaking a strategic programme of work to decide whether a review is needed. But yes, in effect.
Right, thank you. So question 2, you do have a supplementary question to that, Mr. Campbell Kelly. Would you like to read that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Given that the Members' Advisory Group is a non-statutory body, how is it empowered to determine the scope and options? And do the County Council agree that, quote, the latest evidence, unquote, should include the strategic option west of Leicester presented by Willoughby Waterley's Residents Association?
Okay, Tom, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I can do. The MAG will come to a view on the scope and options and advise the constituent partner authorities that make up the MAG on that matter. It will be for the constituent partner authorities to then take decisions through their formal decision-making processes, and the County Council would expect that the...
I think we've lost you there, Tom. You've frozen. Okay, can you still hear me?
Sorry, I was thrown out of the meeting and then I've just come back in.
Okay.
Did you hear my answer?
Okay, would you like to give that answer again from the beginning, please?
Yes, apologies. I seem to have lost the connection.
These things happen.
The MAG will come to a view on the scope and options and advise the constituent partner authorities that make up the MAG on that. It will be for the constituent partner authorities to then take decisions through their formal decision-making processes. The County Council would expect that the MAG will consider any representations that it receives.
Right, thank you. That's good. That's the supplementary to question 2. Question 3, Mr. Campbell Kelly, you have a supplementary to that.
Thank you.
Right, read that.
This answer that I've been given to my initial question confirms that a public consultation into the statement of common ground before implementation in any local plan review is not accepted, i.e. they don't think a public consultation should take place. Transparency is imperative given the significant implications of the Statement of Common Ground on local communities. And it would be improved if such a consultation were to take place. All the more so given that the MAG is a non-statutory body. Do the County Council agree that there should be a consultation into the allocation proposed by the Statement of Common Ground?
Okay, Tom.
Yes, the Statement of Common Ground will be prepared by the MAG, but then signed off by each constituent authority through their formal decision-making processes, which will provide transparency. The opportunity for consultation comes through individual local plan processes in the normal way.
Too late. Too late.
Just for the record, does that include the county council? I understand it does. That they will also sign off through the cabinet.
Yes, that's right. Yes, the Statement of Common Ground is a mechanism for fulfilling the duty to cooperate, and the county council is subject to that duty along with the local planning authorities.
Okay, and again, just for the record, I understand that piece of work is coming to us in respect to the Charnwood one. Is that right?
Yes, that's if you like an interim Statement of Common Ground ahead of the fuller piece of work that's being done between now and the autumn.
Okay, but for the purposes of scrutiny, we'll be looking at that interim statement. Thank you. Question 4. I understand you do have a supplementary to that.
Thank you. It's referred to potential works that had been identified in a strategy previously approved. What transport strategy has already been undertaken that warrants such expenditure being set aside, and what public consultation took place as part of that strategy?
Okay, Tom.
I'm afraid I've not been able to discuss this question with transport colleagues since I received the questions this morning, so we'll provide a written response.
Right, okay, yeah, that's fine, because that really does relate to E&T capital programme, doesn't it? Works, which we are looking at later this morning. Okay, question 5. I understand you have a supplementary to that.
Thank you, yes. This is regarding the Blaby District local plan consultation. It is assumed that the County Council has reached agreement with Blaby to submit its consultation after the deadline date of the 12th of March. Can representations still be made to the County Council before the Cabinet meeting next week, and therefore be included in the submission that's ultimately submitted to Blaby?
Okay, Tom, so that's really a process issue regarding that. Report's now published, isn't it?
It wasn't on the website half an hour ago, but I know it's today. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, the County Council submitted its comments before last Friday's deadline set by Blaby District Council, with the proviso that those comments are subject to Cabinet's consideration of the matter on March the 23rd. Blaby District Council are aware and content with that approach. Representations on the Cabinet report can be made before the meeting on the 23rd.
In the usual manner, in writing.
Yeah. And there is scope to still amend the representation made by the county.
Indeed, the Cabinet needs to ratify, if you like, the submission that's been made. And so if it was minded to change its submission, then that clearly is in its power.
Okay.
Right, so that completes all 5 supplementaries. Thank you very much for coming along today. As you've heard, related matters to the issues you've raised are coming in to us at future meetings, so you may want to keep your eye on the agenda of this committee, and certainly are going to Cabinet. But thank you very much for your
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm muting myself now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming along this morning. Right, item 3, questions by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. I have no questions from members. Item 4, you'll be pleased to know there are no urgent items to be taken today. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest they wish to declare? I'll take the standard one around district councils, because we are looking at the budget performance and council tax and things like that, and there is reference to district councils in that. Are there any other declarations?
Mr. Galton, yes. Hilary here. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Oh, thank you. I apologise for being late.
I believe you had technical problems.
My whole internet has been a nightmare. We won't go into that, but it's a pity it's so early in the morning I can't have a gin. I'd like to declare an interest in items 8 and 10, if I may, please. Item 8, I'm the county councillor for Quorn and Barrow, and the solar farm is actually, although it's in the Quorn ward, it's actually in Barrow, if you know what I mean.
Okay, I don't think, I mean, I'll take advice, but I don't think they're pecuniary, are they?
No.
No. Okay, right.
And the other one is item 10. This is really just for transparency.
Oh, right.
To do with I'm the chair of Borough Council Planning Committee, and on page 57 there were a number of points raised about the planning committee.
Oh, for the school being reviewed. Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other declarations?
No, not from me.
Right. Okay, not by anyone else. Declarations of the party whip. Not aware of any. Item 7, presentation of petitions. There are no petitions today. That takes us to the first substantive item on our agenda today. Item 8, strategic property energy strategy. And we're joined now by Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, and Hannah Moss, Senior Programmes and Performance Officer for Energy, who's going to present this report. Chris, is there anything you want to say at the start, or do you want to go straight to an introduction by Hannah?
If I just say a couple of words, if that's okay, Chair. I think the best way to think about this strategy is first think about the environment strategy. So the environment strategy sets out our approach at a kind of corporate level to all kind of green environmental issues, and that's a very strategic. So it looks internal to the organisation, but it also looks external to the county council as well. So that kind of sits at the higher level, the environment strategy, and the energy strategy is what you're considering today, and that's really a subset of that. And it looks at exactly what we're doing in environmental terms to our own property. So Hannah and I have discussed this, and probably maybe strategy is maybe the wrong term, because it does look at real tangible projects in terms of what we're doing to reduce our energy consumption and indeed generate energy. As with most things at the county council, we have got a small energy team. And even though it isn't a huge resource, they have achieved a lot. And if you look at within the strategy, it sets out some of the things that we've achieved over recent years, such as having a kind of biomass boiler at County Hall, the solar kind of panels that we put on various buildings, county council buildings around the county, electric charging vehicle points, etc. So there's a lot of those things kind of set out in the report. I won't go into kind of what the energy strategy is kind of proposing, because I'll let Hannah take you through the report. So I'll pass over to Hannah now.
Okay, good morning. Welcome, Hannah. Thank you for coming this morning to the Scrutiny Commission. I think this is your first time presenting to us, and you're going to present the report that's in front of us today. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. As Chris mentioned, the property energy strategy is a sub-strategy of the Council's environment strategy. It covers the period from now until 2030, in line with the Council's target to be net zero carbon by 2030. However, the strategy is not a decarbonisation plan for our properties, as more work will be required to identify how we will achieve this. As Chris mentioned, the strategy highlights the progress we've made to date against the targets set in the previous energy strategy. All previous targets have been exceeded. This includes avoided costs of £402,000 since 2017, and the fact that we're now generating over 15% of energy from renewable sources. The new strategy has 3 key aims. The first is saving energy and generating renewable energy to work towards the Council's net zero carbon targets. The second is to ensure energy conservation is embedded into property processes. And the third is to foster a carbon conscious culture at the Council and support carbon saving projects around the county. The strategy supports a green COVID recovery. It details how we'll work with the Ways of Working programme to adapt to changes such as home working. And it sets 2 new targets. The first is a 30% reduction in energy consumption from our council buildings by 2030. And we've also included a stretch target of 50% reduction if more investment can be secured. The second target is to generate 50% of council's energy from renewable sources by 2030. Accompanying the strategy is an action plan which outlines some of the main actions to help us achieve these targets. Some of the actions mentioned include energy upgrades to County Hall and other buildings within the Ways of Working programme, large-scale renewable projects, and the rollout of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Collaborative working will be crucial to the success of the strategy, and the strategy will be regularly reviewed to ensure we are still being ambitious with our targets as technologies and finances advance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very good introduction and gives us a basis for a discussion about this report. I've got a number of speakers. I'm going to start with Rosita.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that introduction. Very ambitious, very welcome targets and strategy. Chris referred, and so did you, that this is a sub-strategy. So can you give me a little bit more information on how we are going to involve partners, how we're going to look outside, and how does it sit within the other strategies, and when are they coming forward? Because, you know, we are now a green council, so I think it would be nice to look at it in a holistic sort of form. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to respond to that?
Well, my understanding is it's the environment strategy that looks at the whole holistic approach to, like say, the council being a green council. Properties carbon emissions are 36% of the council's total carbon emissions. The others made up from street lighting and fleets, I believe. So it's part of the work of the strategic environment team, who will be reporting against the wider environmental agenda.
Okay, Rosita. Right, thank you. David Bill.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My comments are along similar lines to Rosita. I think this is a splendid report, and we should endorse it and give as much encouragement as we can to all the officers who are taking part. But what I'd like to see us do, of course, is to act as an exemplar, if you like, if that's the right word, to the whole community, because the county council is only responsible for quite a small part of the carbon emissions in the county. What we need to look at is whether all the other programmes that the county council is promoting, and the borough councils and the government, because if we're going to build 140,000 more homes across the county, then that's going to be 140,000 more homes emitting carbon. And if we're going to support the Golden Triangle's ambitions to build warehousing all over the south of the county, that's going to put a tremendous amount of carbon into the atmosphere as well. So this is just one important aspect, but it's a small aspect of pollution that we have to face. So I'm looking, as Rosita said, I'm looking forward to seeing how we're going to ensure that we match all the growth that we're expected to take with a programme of containing the pollution that is going to be emitted. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, this is a wider issue then of how when we bring forward new projects, particularly where council's developing, how we're going to address this issue going forward. And I guess it will relate to what can be done through building and regulations and so on, and what would require the council to take a higher line, a tougher line in terms of standards. So, Chris, do you want to have a go at this one?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of this energy strategy, as Hannah said, it is very much focused on our assets. So and kind of what we can do with our assets to generate energy, reduce energy. We do have a bit of a partnership approach. So we are kind of working with schools and kind of other organisations. But I think Mr. Bill's point, I think most of that is covered in terms of the environment strategy, which also has an internal facing but an external kind of aspect to it as well, which will pick up some of those issues. When I was talking to Hannah earlier on today, I think Hannah said, you can correct me if I've got this wrong, that the county council's emissions are only about 1% of the total emissions in Leicestershire. So clearly there's a big aspect in terms of working externally with other partners and organisations, private sector, public sector, to reduce emissions across the county in a broader sense. But that really is picked up under the environment strategy.
Okay, David, so you need to keep your eye on the environment strategy.
Yes,
make sure that's
I have done for the last 30 years, so I expect I should carry on. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay, Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a really helpful report, and it pulls out some really good work that's been going on by the County Council over the last 3 or 4 years, particularly the solar installations, the LED lights, the electric vehicle charging points, the purchasing of green energy since 2019. I think all these are really positive moves by the County Council. Certainly from a personal perspective, in the last 5-10 years, my view on the green agenda and how pressing it is has changed significantly. And I think having these kind of education points and having this clear communications from the council about what it's achieved and what it wants to achieve is really helpful. And I think it should continue to focus on that. One of the points I noted in one of the appendices was around our commitment to reduce water consumption, which obviously, given my role outside of the county council working for Severn Trent, is a particularly interesting point. So I just wondered what we were doing in terms of to achieve that 10% annual reduction in water consumption, which is really important. And also, sorry, just a further question around how we're looking at not just our own assets, but as we've seen from the pandemic, people are working from home more now. They're using other buildings. So how does this dovetail into promoting more efficient energy efficiency amongst their own homes as well, which will be even more important as people do tend to work from home more going forward? Thank you.
That's an interesting one, working from home, isn't it? Which has really impacted over the last 12 months. Chris, do you want to have a go at that?
So if I pick up the kind of home working one, and Hannah, if you can pick up the water consumption one, that'd be okay. So just on the home working, it is a really good point, and we have considered it. So our approach so far has been to provide advice and information to all our employees about how they can reduce energy consumption. I mean, having said that, I think there is more we can do. We did look at things like, should we providing LED lights to people, or just some kind of something a bit more kind of practical. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, we thought that the logistics of it are going to be too difficult. But it is something, I think, as things settle down and kind of society kind of opens up a bit more, that I think we do need to think through exactly what we can do to improve the energy efficiency from people working from home, given that is going to be a trend that's going to stay with us for the foreseeable future. So it is a good point, and I think there's more we can do on it.
Thank you.
And yeah, regarding the water consumption, well, the council's water consumption is actually fairly low, and obviously carbon emissions from water are much lower than gas and electricity. And so for this strategy, the decision was taken not to put in any targets associated with water. However, we still have, a commitment to work at identifying opportunities to reduce our water consumption across the council's estate.
Okay, Peter.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Tom Barclay, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I really comment very much in line with others. I think it gives us great hope for the future. To be quite honest, I hadn't realised we'd achieved as much in terms of our energy policy, and our 64.5% reduction in greenhouse gases from the councils and buildings over the last 10 years. The fact that we're going to employ another energy officer to really drive this forward, because I think it is a vital issue for future generations, and the council has embraced it strongly, and particularly like in the report, the action plan and tangible results that we are trying to achieve, which will be measured and ongoing. So just congratulations on producing such a excellent report. I do wish that people, the general public, knew what we were doing to a greater degree, because I think the council is committed to this policy, and well done to everybody concerned.
Okay, Tom. I think we're all on the same line as you and Peter have expressed on this one. There's wide support, and the officers are doing a great job in developing these strategies and implementing them. I don't think you'd got a question there. I think you've just expressed a view which I'm sure we'd all want to agree with. Is that okay? Right, I've got Dr. Terry Inan next, please.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I agree with many of the comments that have gone before. It's really good to see the effort that this council is putting in to reducing its energy consumption. And I'm very pleased to see that we're going ahead with the ISO 5001 certification for energy management, which I think will help to push us along that route further. I did have a quibble, though, with paragraph 16. Where it states COVID-19 has presented an unexpected opportunity to save energy. No, it hasn't really. What's happened is we've exported energy demand to our staff. And I think that this is something we've perhaps not been counting. And it would be difficult to actually measure to what extent we have increased the energy bills of our staff by expecting them to run the computers, etc., from home, keep their homes heated and so on while they're at work. So I'm really interested then in the question of how we can practically help our staff, not just providing advice and information. If they have increased energy costs, should we be bearing that? Should we be somehow taking this into account? If we are going to move towards more home working, surely we should be taking some responsibility for the energy usage that our employees make while in their own homes, and trying to minimise that as much as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Terry. So I think Chris has partially acknowledged your point in his previous answer, saying this needs more work in how we're going to do it. I agree with your comment about where we've effectively exported the issue because people are spending more time having to work at home. They're in their house when they wouldn't be there because they'd have been out at work all day, and they're going to, particularly during the last few months, increased heating bills. I'm sure we'd all be able to speak from experience on that one. So what sort of things can we look at? I mean, what about this contract we've got where, was it with Nottingham that we looked to have this company that bulk purchased energy supplies? Is that an option to expand that, Chris?
Well, not that won't be an option because obviously Robin Hood Energy have now gone bankrupt. So that partnership has.
No, I wasn't aware of that. It's gone bankrupt.
Yeah, that has gone bankrupt in a big way.
No, we don't want to go there then. Do we?
That avenue's been closed off. I mean, there's not a lot more I can say. Just acknowledge that I think there is more that we should be doing. It isn't a simple issue in some respects because obviously some people have been working from home. We'll be saving on transport costs. And there is a reduction in energy and cost around those, but we do acknowledge there are some additional energy costs from people working at home, particularly over this winter. So it is something we do need to get our heads around and have a think through if there is anything else we can do to support them, and it's something we have. I say so far it has been just a signpost into advice and information because the government has clearly put a lot of money behind some of its initiatives. So we have been trying to publicise those to the various grants that are available to people. We have been trying to kind of push those. But there possibly is more we can do. And it's something that I'm sure we'll come back to over the summer.
OK, Terry. So no answers at the minute, but acknowledgement that it does need to be looked at. Right, Alan Pearson.
Thanks, Simon. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, just I think Terry has got a good comment. I think what we're saying is there's a gulf between what we can control, it's control the controllables, which we've been brilliant at with our own county, is how we impact Leicestershire as a whole. And we discussed this at the Transport and Environment, really quite clear that we understood that. And we have to go back to the original documentation in the 90s or early 80s. I can't remember 2000 or whatever, but there is issues where we can actually private companies or other companies that actually capture the whole carbon emissions within a county, not just left to the districts. And our impact will be how we can have some programs such as credit programs to households who get credits or get given bonuses or funds back, and this was available with the European Commission for saving energy and for reducing carbon. So there is programs out there in the world I think we can look at. I think we've got our home sorted out. The goal is, and we're all admitting that, the difficult one is how we influence the rest of Leicestershire. But I think we can do it, looking at best practices and impacting on that and implementing in the future. I believe we can. Thank you.
Okay, Alan. So again, your comments are more about not our own strategy and how we've put our own house in order at County Hall in our buildings. It's how we can then widen that and
Yes.
encourage both
Trench 2. We called it Simon Trench 2, and it's something we've discussed. I mean, from all the cross members here today in this meeting will agree. We have discussed it. We've been aware of it. How do we do it? And I've brought to the Scrutiny Committee, look, we need to go back, because there was definitely, and I remember clear as day, there was some funds available that would be dished out at our area at the Leicestershire level if we proved that we were reducing carbon emissions within the public. But I think we'd lost that somewhere, or whether it's available now. But I do feel we've set a good example. But I do feel Trench 2, we now need to impact people around us and the whole community. I think we didn't. What hasn't been mentioned here, and it was brought up, that we commission services. We bring contractors in, and maybe in the future we say we need to know what you're using for carbon and what. So we need to put that in. Exactly what Terry said. If people are working at home, and the argument is with Chris, well, if they're not catching the bus and transport, it's complex. But we can influence commission and contractors, and we can work with the districts when it comes down to planning. That we, as you know, we've got to get rid of gas boilers, but we need healthy living houses that are cheap to run. And I think we lose the plot sometimes. Housing, if you've got proper solar, you don't have to pay electricity. It's free if you have the modern solar. So we can have people in social housing that don't have an electricity bill for the whole year. These are the things we need to look at to encourage as much as possible the public within Leicestershire to go down this negative carbon emissions, because not only is it good for the environment, it's good for the pocket.
Okay, so again, you're on the wider issue of how we look at influencing and using our role as the county council to.
Yes, and I think we're such a great example, but now we need to get out there. Yes,
the right body to do that is through this environment strategy, which Mr. Bill has referred to and the officers have referred to. Okay, right. I don't have anyone else. The officers have got strong support from the Scrutiny Commission for the work done. And
I did raise my hand.
Sorry, Bill, I didn't see you. Right. Yep. Okay. Carry on. I still can't see your hand, but please come in.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, at long last, the county's taking the environment seriously. I mean, we've been at this for years now. They're very slow to actually get started. We had one or two climate deniers in the past. It's held things up. We had a previous officer that when I asked him the question, Mr. Roberts said, yes, there's money available to do these measures, but the Tories didn't take it up. Talking about street lighting, we're talking about solar panels on the roofs. All this could be done years ago, but we're very slow to start. But thank goodness now we're getting somewhere.
Perhaps a little slow, but we're moving that direction now. A bit concerned about the water, because in the papers it said target not met. Now, we heard this morning there's not a target. So we've got papers that say there is a target, and now we're told there's not. Water saving is very important. It's not just energy we're trying to save, but other things for the environment as well. Using recycled water, we should look at that, especially County Hall. The other phrase I'm concerned about, it says County Hall campus likely to continue expanding. That's on page 28. Like to know where that's come from. We shut down all the satellite buildings, so all that energy has been taken into account, I assume, as energy, because that would alter our figures considerably. So I'd like an explanation, please, about why we're not doing anything about water. I understand it's not about carbon, but to recycle water is very important. It's a finite resource.
Okay, I didn't think the officer said they weren't doing anything. I think it's just not part of this strategy. But let's ask Hannah to clarify.
Yes. Simon, can I chip in first and then pass over to Hannah? I think Mr. Walter's been a bit harsh actually on the county council. Because to be honest, I think we've made some really good progress, and actually going back a long time. I don't think when the audit commission were here and they used to assess us on lots of different things, we used to get the top marks in terms of our approach to the environment. So and that's going back kind of 10 years, and you can see some of the kind of some of the achievements within the strategy. And I don't think there's many county councils with a biomass boiler, for example. I imagine we're probably they're probably the only one, and we've been solar cells and all the rest. We've been doing that for a number of years. So I think a little bit harsh, Mr. Walter. Just on the water, and Hannah was on top of the details, so she should be explained a bit more. But there is a point where the cost of the investment to reduce energy, there are other more beneficial things to do, such as generate energy. So it might be kind of more cost effective to build a solar farm than, for example, to put LED lights in traffic lights, for example, just on a cost benefit basis. So they're the kind of things that we do look at. And I think water in part falls into that issue. It's a very expensive thing to do in terms of the benefit you get from it, and sometimes there are more cost-effective interventions that you can make to actually reduce carbon. Anyway, I'll pass over to Hannah, who will be able to explain a bit more detail.
Yes, thank you, Chris. You're right. It does come down to kind of the payback on the projects of water being a lot longer than like those for energy. Regarding the sort of confusing statement in the strategy, there's no target set for this current strategy, and the comment about the target not being met was from the previous strategy. And the reason the previous target was not met was because whilst we did look at water saving projects, and we struggled to identify opportunities basically across our estate. As I say, our water consumption is fairly low, and the cost to actually do some of these projects didn't pay back in a reasonable period. So we're not looking at water, but we're just balancing it up against the cost of other projects too.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Fryer, did you want to come in?
Thank you very much. Yes, everybody said it's an excellent strategy. We've done very well, which I entirely agree. How much are we affected by Leicester City? And do we work with them on things? And do they have a strategy like this? Because we're sorting out our side, but in the centre of Leicestershire is Leicester City. And surely a lot of the things that we're trying to mitigate against can be caused by Leicester City unless they're doing the same type of thing.
So all the figures in our reports, and I believe in the environment strategy, are just focused on the county areas. They exclude the city and any kind of emissions from the city. I believe the City Council do have their own energy strategies and carbon reduction strategies. We do work with our colleagues in the city where there's projects that might overlap. But I don't know the detail on their strategies.
No.
Would it be useful if we did know what their strategies were? Because if we're Our strategy is going one way and they're going in the opposite direction.
I believe they've also made.
We don't have any influence over that, though, do we?
No, I know we don't have any influence on it, but it would be nice to know.
I believe they've also made a declaration to be net zero carbon by 2030. So I think we're both heading in the same direction.
Ah, well, that's a good commitment then, isn't it? If they've made the same declaration.
Can I come in, Simon? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to reassure Mrs. Fry that we do work with the city on specific projects. So two that kind of spring to mind for me are around kind of the purchasing of energy, you know, that the Robinhood Energy kind of fossil energy thing we did with the city, because there were obvious synergies there. And we're also, again, Hannah, I've lost track of this project, but in terms of the park and ride and the electric buses, again, that's something we would be working with the city on. So again, that there are a number of projects where it makes sense to work with the city. We do work with the city, as we would with districts or with schools or with other parts of the public sector.
Okay. Terry Richardson, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. It was just on the point of joint working with the city. I don't know. It's obviously not a committee I sit on or go to, but do we have a joint transport strategy to reduce emissions from cars, which also use energy? Because the only reason I raised that, within my division the week before last, along with the MP and several members of staff from county, we met with residents about problems of traffic in their area, where their perception was that it was jointly caused because of the bus lane going through Glen Parva, which backed up traffic. And therefore there are two issues: number one, pollution, but number two is energy usage, with cars sitting stationary. So it's a question of how much joint transport work do we do, because there is a perception amongst a lot of my residents that the actions taken by the city to restrict transport going into the city at a decent pace are impacted on their areas on the edge of the city, both in pollution and increased energy usage.
Right, you're straying into what high really environment and transport strategies.
No, I didn't say that at the start, and I said it's, I just asking for confirmation. Yeah. It's something that's on their agenda. That was all.
I suspect that this is something that would need picking up over the transport strategy. My understanding is there is joint working. Probably could do more. Usually is, but I think we'd need to sort of refer that one on to E&T. To get you an answer on that. Is there anything you're able to answer on that, Chris, or shall we ask for Anchor others to give a written comment back to members?
I'd ask Anchor others. I mean, just picking up on your point, I know there is joint working. The depth of it, I'm not equipped to answer that question, but there is joint working. Okay,
we'll fire that one to the department and ask them for the current situation. Alan, you still got your hand up. Did you need to come back?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Just quickly. Yes. Sorry. Yep. Just the water situation. I've read loads of reports. I mean, the problem we've got, considering the amount of rain and floods we get, the major issue is the infrastructure in the UK. We've got Victorian plumbing, as to say, Victorian sewerage. And the cost to this has been a problem for governments over the past 50 years to maintain it, to upgrade it, is astronomical. So the major issue about fluid is about water is the infrastructure, because of course we do have a lot of water, but we don't retain it, and we've got a limited landmass to build dams. So there is an issue there, but I don't think it's a Leicestershire County Council problem. It's a central government thing.
Okay. Thanks for that comment. Right, so we've covered the strategy. We're all broadly in favour of the strategy. Everyone wants to do more, and we're going to need to do that through the environment strategy. I think that's a summary of the situation, but I would like to thank the officers and really strong support from this commission for the work that's being done, and all power to you going ahead with future strategies. Thank you very much for attending this morning.
Thank you.
Moving on then to item 9, Airfield Business Park Development Proposal. we've got John Bennett, Head of Strategic Property, and he's joining us. Are you with us, John?
Yes, I am.
Thanks very much.
Hello,
would you like to present this report?
Yes, thank you. The Commission will note that the purpose of the report is to advise of the proposals for the next phases of Airfield Farm Business Park at Market Harborough. Paragraphs 5 to 9 cover the background of the scheme and highlights the success that we've had in the most recent phase. And the Commission will note that 10 out of the 12 units we've built last year are now let, and we have serious interest in the last remaining 2 units. Paragraphs 10 to 16 provides an overview of the next phases of development of what we're looking to provide. And at Cabinet, we should be asking for approval for the submission of the planning application for 27 new units and for the capital to build out that scheme. And just to link back to the previous report that Hannah was presenting, these units will have photovoltaic cells on each of them and will have electric car charging points as well, each of the units. As can be seen on the timeline from paragraph 16, the planning application is due to be submitted next month with the aim of securing planning permission on or before September of this year. And although the timetable suggests that formal marketing would not commence until January next year, it is likely that actually we'll bring this forward. And as soon as we've secured planning permission, we will then commence the formal marketing with the aim of trying to achieve some pre-lets to the scheme, so the scheme can be slightly de-risked. Paras 17 to 26 cover the financial aspects of the scheme, and you will note that the overall budget for the development is £9.5 million, with expected rental income just shy of £780,000 a year to the County Council, a yield of over 7.5%, which is acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right. There's a short presentation there. Who would like to ask any questions or clarifications on this project? Tom Barclay.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support it. I think it's a great scheme. It's going to engender employment opportunities and everything else. One small query, and I may have misunderstood it, is that the actual payback on the investment is going to take over 20 years. Now, maybe I've misunderstood that, but the amount we're investing will take over 20 years to return. I'd just ask for a comment on that.
The worst case scenario is looking at that sort of length. However, what we will be looking to do is, one, by going to tender the build contract, we hope to make substantial savings on the overall budget, and also with the rent, we've already increased the rental income budget from £8 a square foot to £10 a square foot over what we achieved in the previous scheme. So by the time we get this on site and get through the reviews, we hope to make serious inroads into that payback. But overall, we will have both the rental income and capital growth. So should we seek to get some liquidity of our assets, we'll have a very marketable investment to sell should we need to.
Yeah, thank you. I fully appreciate that. That's reassuring. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Einan.
Thank you, Chair. This looks a very interesting proposition, and I'm interested then, looking at paragraph 13. Could you kind of flesh out what kinds of businesses we're likely to attract to this site, and where the employees are likely to live, and how are they going to travel there?
Okay, well, in terms of the likely businesses, we've had everything from printers to bakers to people looking to store things. We've had 5 businesses out of the 10 who moved into the last phase were local and looking to expand, sort of grow on space, expanding their business, and 5 actually invested into the county from outside of the county. In terms of where people live, don't know if you know, but there is a major housing scheme actually going on at the back of this site. So it would be ideal if the employees came from there. But we haven't done any analysis of where employees live, so I can't answer that question, I'm afraid.
Okay, Terry.
Yes, I'm assuming as part of the planning permission that you will be doing a sort of transport assessment, and I think we usually have a requirement of some kind of travel plan. That's something that's been thought of.
Absolutely, and the costs in the financial appraisal take account of any Section 106 contributions for travel plans.
Thank you.
Okay, Rosita.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Good report, fully supportive. But I'm looking at paragraph 29, and that is the risk. And it refers to these include consultancy fees, infrastructure, design, funding, timing commitment, and there seem to be rather an awful lot of risks. And going back to some things in my division, there was a constant drip in for additional cost. So being mindful of the uncertainty of the times, how do we ensure we mitigate the risk and ensure that the cost are within reason, because otherwise we will never realise the yields we are promising in the first place, if you see what I'm trying to say. So talk me through that, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, the fact that we are going to take this scheme out to a competitive open tender is almost ready now. Will be submitted next month. So we're hoping that because it'll be submitted to the county council's DCRB to determine, as it's a county council owned scheme on county council land. And so as long as all of the reports are acceptable to the planning colleagues and then to the DCRB on or before September, then again that risk is mitigated. And there's actually, even if there's a slight delay to the planning, that shouldn't hit overall risks to the scheme, because everything just shifts. It just means that the income doesn't start coming in as early as we'd hoped. The other points, consultancy fees and infrastructure design costs, they will all be kept within the open tender.
Okay, good. And then finally, Dr. Feltham.
Thank you, Chairman. No, a good scheme. It's something I've been waiting for a long time, passing that derelict bit of land nearly every week. I've been to the Innovation Centre, Harbour's Innovation Centre, which is obviously just next door, a number of times over the years, training events and so on. And one of the difficulties they have is the fact that there's not enough car parking on their particular plot. And so people park all over the place, including obviously more or less where the roads leading up to where this new Airfield Business Park will be. That will no doubt come through during the planning side, but just to be aware, I think, that when they do get full at the Innovation Centre, the cars go everywhere, and it just might be worth just being aware of it, really, that's all.
That'll be picked up with as part of the planning process, will it, John?
It will, and we will remind the District Council and the Innovation Centre of their responsibilities, because what we don't want is to have a scheme that is difficult to let because of the actions of others.
Okay, right, so general support for this scheme, right time to create small employment opportunities and allow companies to grow. So next step is to submit a planning application, isn't it?
Yes, we'll go to Cabinet first for the approval and then the planning application. Yeah.
Okay, John, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Going to move on now to the last report this morning, medium-term financial strategy monitoring period, number 10. We're joined by Chris, I'm sure he hasn't left us, but he's back with us, Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, and also I believe Declan Keenan is joining us, Assistant Director. Chris, do you want to say anything to start off with?
I'm going to let Declan kick off, and then I'll say a few words at the end.
Okay. Declan, can we do this the usual way in managed chunks?
Yeah, I can do, Chess. If I
revenue first, and then I'll invite any comments on that, and then we'll have a look at capital.
Yep, no, that's fine with me. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so the update report on the revenue budget, as the Chair mentioned, is period 10. The last report you saw was back in period 6, and things have improved quite a bit in that time. Back in period 6, we were talking about an overspend of about £7 million, and now it's obviously flipped to an underspend of £4 million. And the big improvement really is more about kind of, I suppose, government support and funding rather than anything else. We've had, over that sort of 4-month period, the sales fees and charges sort of scheme has been kind of clarified, furloughs being extended, and there's also the 75% council tax losses underwrite, which we were providing for in the current year. So that's taking kind of, each one of those takes millions away, particularly the council tax. As we move into year end, there's still obviously things going on with sort of in the external environment or internal environment as well, relating to COVID. We don't expect the position to get worse because government really has turned the taps on over the last few months. We're getting roughly about sort of 3 million a month at the moment from sort of government, from a range of sort of different funding streams. So as I'm sure you can appreciate, it's kind of that's mopping up some of the previous sort of unfunded costs, and it's quite hard to spend at that rate, to be quite honest. The thing I would really sort of strongly suggest, though, there's a huge amount of uncertainty that does remain in next year, and whilst the kind of the lockdown path presented does help, if kind of particularly with sort of schools reopening is very helpful, and if that can be maintained, it does help to relieve some of the pressures. But there's some massive areas that the government just haven't talked about yet. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One is hospital discharges. I think nationally, the sort of the figures sort of in the billions, but locally, this year to date, we've received £16 million to accelerate those hospital discharges. We've had zero indication at this point in time what government's going to do, although you do imagine they like the idea of sort of speedier discharges, so it's hard to imagine that it doesn't change. But like I say, 16 million's a lot to find for us if they weren't to repeat that. The other measures that's kind of come in there is around sort of care homes as well. And again, there's sort of we've given funding to care homes to make sure they can kind of, I suppose, survive through the pandemic. But the government's put a lot of money in there, particularly around sort of infection control measures. The most eye-catching one was preventing sort of staff moving between care settings, and they've actually put that on a statutory footing now. Unfortunately, though, again, this costs about £16 million, so it's huge. That they haven't indicated any funding for next year. So there's kind of two examples in excess of £30 million where we've just got no idea from government what's happening. But they are the kind of measures you would expect to last, through the sort of the lockdown path, and potentially even beyond, in truth. And, there was talk over the weekend of another sort of wave in the autumn, which is kind of just what everybody wanted to hear. So the approach, there is a lot of nervousness around next year. Hopefully the government will sort of step forward again, but the approach is to very much sort of build a COVID budget for next year with any spare resources we get, so we can manage that without sort of knee-jerk actions. So if I can turn members' attention to the table in paragraph 11, that just summarises basically kind of the position we've got at the moment. I'll just go through this, sort of pick out the key points really quickly. High needs, you'll see it's similar to last time. It's sort of just shy of £10 million, and it is a significant problem for us. And the work is continuing on sort of increasing the capacity in local settings. That does help to manage the cost, but it is only one part of the solution, as it were. The other one, which is much harder to do, is the demand sort of management, and trying to get that sort of just sheer level of kind of demand down, because it's kind of build it and they will come, and unfortunately they're coming quicker than we can build it at the moment. So demand is still an issue that needs to be worked through, and the balance in terms of resources we've had to direct towards just covering this grant shortfall is £17 million by the end of this year. So it's a huge amount of money again that just has to be put to an issue that was sort of government created and government has sort of been very slow to resolve. Children's and family service members will notice that the overspend there has gone up from sort of circa £3 to £4 million. Now, in truth, the underlying reasons haven't changed. It's a bit of a this is a bit more of a reaction to the spending review, to be honest. The spending review is only 1 year, and we were starting to the money that we'd set aside for the Supporting Leicestershire Families programme is starting to run out. Now, the government funding will see us through sort of 2021-22, but not beyond that. We've obviously been supplementing it from reserves for a few years. So the decision has been made to just, leave the money in the reserve so that come the spending review, which is going to be sometime in the autumn, but we don't know the content, we're not in a knee-jerk situation of kind of the money's run out, as it were. So, while we can with the sort of the easing of the pressure in the current year, we're just leaving the money in the reserve to last it for supporting Leicestershire families for another year, just to avoid any kind of cliff edge type scenario. Like I say, the other areas around social care is similar, and the Newton Europe work in there is going to be really key to. Again, it's been a department that's sort of overspent for the last few years. Those pressures coming in from sort of growth in children's, the additional cost of placements associated with that. So we do need to sort of get on top of that. So just a reminder that Newton Europe are in there working on that at the moment. Adults and communities overspending, not a surprise. This is kind of where at the heart of the pandemic, as it were, and that overspend's gone up by about £1 million from P6, and this is related to service user income, and it's difficult at the best of times, but it's been made much harder this year because kind of a lot associated with the hospital discharge. There's a lot of sort of agreements about sort of not charging people immediately, just get them out of the hospital into a care setting has been the drive, and health have compensated for us that, but it's left quite a kind of it's left quite a task to sort of untangle, and they're working through that, and it's obviously quite difficult to forecast as well. Key issues to be aware of that I do want to flag up to members is we forward funded right at the start of the pandemic the social care providers. It was a tune of about £11 million. So just make sure that kind of they had the money to keep operating. We didn't know what was coming. We didn't know how quickly we'd have to be able to relax, but it just gave them cash flow money to sort of deal with things, to sort of take them off that emergency footing. And the reclaim of that's been going on over the last few months, and we've got 9 million of the 11 million back. So it's making good progress so far. Most providers have been kind of working really well with us, but it doesn't mean obviously that still leaves £2 million outstanding. So just to make members aware, that is a headache and a worry that we're working through at the moment. Public health, bit of an odd one. Obviously, they've again a department at the heart of the pandemic. They've got a huge amount going on, so it's no surprise some of the underlying public health services are underspending at the moment. So it's obviously an earmarked fund still. So we've just moved that £1 million of underspend into kind of a reserve, so it's still available to public health. Moving into environment and transport, previously this was an area that was over, and there was a lot of worry about sort of transport costs. How do you manage the sort of social distancing, etc. And a lot of those sort of pressures have eased off, partly because sort of the government guidance have relaxed things, partly because you just get used to dealing with these things. But we've also had a benefit because obviously some of the services being provided have naturally sort of dropped away around transport. If people haven't been going to school, they don't necessarily need that provision. So that's eased off. There's also been on the highway side of things a mixture of new fundings come in there, but also some holding of vacancies has helped that overall sort of position as well. Corporate resources, again, I touched on some of these areas at the start where the government have provided support, and corporate resources have been a big beneficiary in there because of the sort of the traded element of a lot of the services. So that's why the corporate resources position is improved. And you'll notice chief execs is similar to what it was before. That £1.5 million is really around the voluntary and community sector support that was provided right at the start of the pandemic. It's just sort of sat there as an overspend. So that's everything I was going to say. I think on the revenue budget, we'll kind of the overspend we're going to direct it towards sort of reducing some of the kind of the revenue sort of financing of sort of capital kind of issues as sort of the first core. But like I say, a lot of the stuff I talked about on the actually, sorry, no, I'm getting mixed up with my own notes. Apologies. The capital financing we go into, that's a couple of million worse, and the reason we've done that is the disposal income has been delayed for the last kind of couple of years. And we're getting into a bit of a crunch point where we're doing this sort of internal sort of funding of some of the schemes. And if that happens before we get these receipts, you get a bit of a cash crunch. Now the benefit of the disposals hasn't gone away; it's just been delayed. But it's just taken a bit more of a conservative approach than we haven't before, because we've always just sort of cash flowed it and almost put it later in the kind of the cascade of funding that we do draw down. But if we're going to draw on our capital reserves for sort of forward funding, it's hard to do it for the disposals as well. So just making sure we're covered in there. And the report goes on as well to touch on central costs, and we did put a sort of a provision there. People only know what they know. So earlier in the year, we created that sort of £5 million sort of pot that was able to sort of draw down from. And some of the identified sort of areas in this, things like this sort of free school meals, we didn't need in the end because, again, we got government grants. So a lot of this is looking like we'll use to top up the COVID budget or to supplement the transformation unit resources who have been sort of directed onto kind of COVID related activities this year, but obviously still need to do their savings activities in future years. So there's a bit of sort of on that. Council tax, I mentioned on this sort of the 75% scheme. We've held the forecast at the moment, and it's likely that things are going to get better. Furlough has a big impact in this. We've got another exercise with the district council over the next few weeks, just working through what the kind of the position is across the county area. So that'll give us a better basis for revising that. So they're the key points I want to sort of pull out from the report. Just one to make members aware of on business rates. Business rates has been held up pretty well because of all the government support going in there around sort of either letting people off rates and things like that. But the one thing it's a bit of an emerging issue at the moment is there's some revaluations going on for sort of exceptional circumstances, but COVID obviously being one of them. So it could be that kind of some of that sort of funding that we got from government could go away depending on how government interpret those sort of revaluations. So we get funding as a county council to compensate us for lost rates income. Now normally that's been for sort of decisions government make. It's not normally made for revaluation decisions. So there's a bit of a concern there that they could have given us money with one hand to then just take it away with another. But that's being worked through at the moment. But overall, that does leave us with that £4 million underspend. And as I started going into before, it is the aim is just reducing that internal sort of funding of capital with all the different pressures. So I'll pause there if that's okay, Chair, and happy to take questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Declan. A very comprehensive introduction there. So this chunk pots of money that we've got for COVID, you're saying that's providing a bit of cushion. Does that have to be spent by a certain time, or are you able to carry that over and it can help with COVID's not going to suddenly go away with it. Everyone's saying in some shape or form it's going to continue to be with us, and that will inevitably have put pressures on certain areas. So is it time limited? Do we have to return it, or can we put it in a pot till we need it?
It's a real mixed picture, and there was a trend of reducing the amount of sort of these specific grants that we get, sort of an individual bit of money with a whole load of specific conditions. But we're getting, we get dozens of them now, and each grant tends to be a bit different. The push from government does probably on the majority of those grants is spend it this year. I think they have realised that that's it is quite difficult, particularly when you're setting up schemes, sort of some of the public health things around sort of test and trace and, the whole contain things. So they have softened it to around use of the word commitment. So if you're committing to money this year, even if you spend it next year, there's a bit of flexibility there. So, but exactly sort of the point you're making, we are trying to find that balance between the money we've got this year and creating certainty for next year as well. But we are desperately short kind of next year at the moment. But yeah, we are trying to create that balance.
Okay, and what do you mean when you talk about changes in the care home market? It's one of the bullet points that you're highlighting there. Is that nationally or something happening locally?
It's nationally. I mean, the vacancy levels in sort of care homes has sort of gone from maybe you might have sort of 5 to 10% of sort of vacancies, and it can be sort of 20% plus now. And obviously that has a fundamental impact on people's business models, and that's obviously driven partly by sort of short-term things. But people's view will change about what care setting they want to be looked after within, and how care homes operate as well. The standard of infection controls you would expect to increase. I think it is very much a national problem. It's it has held up pretty well, and that is a mixture of I suppose sort of credit to the care homes themselves, but also the funding that we've had to put in locally and funding that sort of government has put in. But you would expect to be changes in the care home market. We got one of the big national players, HC1, did announce recently that it was selling off some of its homes and shutting down some of its homes. So you would expect that kind of contraction of the market to happen as people's preference to care home at home increases.
Okay, thank you. I've got Dr. Einem.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for an excellent and detailed report, Declan. I just wanted to focus down on paragraph 43, the overspend on commercial services, which clearly has been very difficult for us, as in other businesses that are involved in things like hospitality, food, etc. So I see that we're going to be developing an optimum portfolio of commercially sustainable services going ahead. And this may result in some services discontinuing, which is the kind of thing that normally gets people quite worried. How are we going to hear about this? How is it? Will it be discussed and progressed, and will it be scrutinised? Do we know?
It's probably going to be, I suppose, and I suppose in some ways, I want to talk about sort of generically about review. It does tend to end up almost kind of, I suppose, service by service, and I suppose there's those. Depending on the sort of scale of what's been done. So, for example, I don't know, recently, if within County Hall, they did have a bit of a review of the sort of the catering sort of setup in there, and it was relatively kind of sort of small scale. So that one doesn't tend to kind of come through, I suppose, for scrutiny on an individual basis. But if it was a bigger sort of more fundamental kind of, more fundamental sort of closure of a service, you would expect it to kind of come through as a kind of a, a cabinet decision and the associated sort of scrutiny alongside it as well. So it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag, I suppose. To give it some context, I mean, the COVID crisis is very unusual for our set of traded services, because education is normally what you describe as kind of quite a defensive area that's, really safe in kind of good times and bad times. But, shutting schools is kind of, for this sort of period of time, is kind of unheard of. So it hit us hard. And, like I say, you'd normally assess our setup as kind of quite defensive. So that was kind of quite a difficult one. So it's just reviewing, how do we do it? How do we protect ourselves going forward? But you've also got other areas that we've got is more the hospitality type basis, the cafes and places like Bow Manor, and they've been a bit of a mixed bag. The cafes have actually done really well, whereas sort of Bow Manor's obviously been shut all year, so it's more difficult. So it's a little bit of a case of trying to see through the kind of the difficulties we've got at the moment, because you don't take a knee-jerk decision when you're at the worst of what's going on, and just sort of gradually working through the different options that we've got. But to answer your question, I would expect it's kind of for the bigger ones, it is going to be sort of that cabinet scrutiny kind of arrangement. I don't know if Chris has got any bits to add to that.
I'd echo that. Anything kind of more fundamental would go through. Well, if it's done this year, it would be a specific report to cabinet and potentially scrutiny. And then if it's wrapped up as part of it next year's MTFS, well, you'll see it all anyway, because it will go through the usual process.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry.
Yep.
Rosita.
Thank you, Chairman. Very good report. My favourite is always the Appendix C, where it gives me an awful lot of information. So my question is directed, fairly general. One thing is, as we've got an underspend all across, can that underspend be redirected into other area? Or for instance, hang on, how much was it in environment? 1.5 million. Are we going to spend it on something like, I don't know, fixing potholes and the roads while we still can and traffic is low? My other question is an update, please. First of all, explain to me, are only the project listed where there is a net slippage, because that is what it says. So if I'm looking corporate program, it says net slippage, and then there are the items listed, because, for instance, I was wondering if I could have an update on Leaders Farm. I haven't seen anything on there, and I know it's progressing, but I assume it's not down there because there's no slippage in the program. Explain that to me, because that's been ongoing for some time, and I haven't seen.
I think that's on capital. We'll come to that.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
what I said, Appendix C, sorry. Well, yeah, my question, so I don't have to come back then. And update on M1 Junction 20A Advanced Design. And I'm done with that. Thank you.
Okay, so what most of this is capital. What relates to revenue?
None.
Okay.
Nothing. Sorry, I did say in my chat, my question is on Appendix C.
Okay, right. I'll ask. So if there's no other points on revenue, I can't see anyone. I'll ask Declan to move on to capital and then answer your questions at the end of that.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. It's a pretty quick summary of capital, to be honest. As members will notice, it's sort of 34 million behind budget, and this is a mixture really of sort of COVID-related kind of delays, but also kind of existing grants coming in year that they haven't sort of fully been able to kind of sort of spend within that in-year money, plus the usual kind of sort of story of kind of delays to start dates due to kind of permissions, whether that's kind of planning permission or funders conditions or other sort of agreements that need to be due. So I won't go through all the slippage because it just tends to be just a move back between years. Just pick out the items that actually aren't slippage. I felt would be probably more useful. So the first one, there's about £400,000 on the adult social care investment programme, which is the accommodation work for sort of service users. It's that part of the strategy of kind of change the care settings tends to be away from sort of residential work. So there's a bit of an overspend on that, but the reappraisal does suggest it is still very positive in terms of a financial sort of aspect of doing that. M1 Junction 23, 2.3 million over there, and it's a combination of sort of as happens with sort of these big schemes, as you get on site discovering things, the programme length having to be extended, but also Highways England doing a sort of additional sort of requirements around the sort of the slip road work. So it's kind of, there was almost three things that kind of hit them there. And then the final one is going to sort of pull out the sort of the in corporate resources, the Snibston and sort of Sizemby Farm sort of schemes, Sizemby Farm being Melton. They're looking at the sale of sort of the site for the developer to remediate, rather than us doing it ourselves and then sort of selling it with a remediated land. And that's just purely from the conditions that were being put on it by funders. It's just felt at the moment it's more likely to be kind of financially kind of beneficial to the county council to do it that way around, just because the funders were looking for a bigger slice of the pie, as it were. And in terms of the non-capital programme piece, there's the CAFE reporting in there, the Corporate Asset Investment Fund, and it's the revenue returns only, so we don't touch on those sort of capital appreciations, although the capital values are a bit all over the place this year with COVID. But you see, if you look at the operational sites, it's 4.6% return, which is, it's a good return. It sort of reflects, I suppose, the kind of the fairly safe nature of these investments. They're not in the sort of the sort of shopping centre type sort of part of the sort of the world that sort of has really suffered, but you can see this, it's a good performance, and it helps with that sort of overall sort of financial sustainability of the council. So that's all I was going to say on the capital side of things. In terms of Mrs. Page's three questions, the first one, the underspend, how we can use that. So it is, I suppose, unring-fenced money, as it were. If it drops down into that overall underspend, it's at Cabinet's discretion to use it as they see fit. And we tend to have suggestions through the course of the year, but it's the outturn report that comes in sort of May, June time, where the Cabinet will set how they want to redirect that funding. So it could be towards something like potholes. It depends where we're going to sort of be at that point in time with COVID. I'd suggest the recommendations are likely to be around kind of shoring up the finances at this point in time. But that said, if the COVID budget isn't needed long term, then there's flexibility there to do quite a bit with it. And that's a hope, to be honest. Plan for the worst. No, I'm making the right pigs here. It's kind of you kind of hope things will turn out better than you plan for, don't you? So I'll drop any further analogies. You mentioned Leaders Farm, and there hasn't been a report on the slippage there. The reason for that is the way we do the CAFE programme is it's always known there's kind of quite a few John's got kind of quite a few irons in the fire, and they've got potential to move around quite a lot. So what we tend to do is, as schemes have been approved by Cabinet, we drop them formally into the capital programme to be reported against. And where we think the Quorn Solar Farm got mentioned earlier in the meeting, and that's one of them in there. So we'd report slippage against a scheme like that. But Leaders Farm, because it hasn't been because it's not developed enough in terms of a programme at the moment. I just had a quick check in the medium-term financial strategy for the current year. It's not in there yet. Now, the way that scheme is at the moment is it's still working through with planning permission with the kind of between kind of John's team and the sort of the planners, just working out what sort of information they need to bring that sort of scheme forward. It hasn't progressed in terms of a sort of a live scheme yet. And then the final question you asked was about M1 Junction 20A on advanced design. I wasn't sure what the question was there, to be honest. If you'd be asked, just let me know what it is you were after.
No, just a general update, Chris. Thank you. Declan, thank you. I was looking at Chris then, sorry. Thank you, Declan.
So I presume this is, at the moment there's an overspend on the scheme, and the intention is to sort of partly fund that from sort of the advanced design work that they hold, which is just generally there for sort of to development of future schemes. The hope is that they can sort of develop it or get further funding through Section 106 in that sort of area around there. There is quite a bit of house building. I don't think there's no real sort of update on the scheme yet. I mean, the good news on the scheme is it's nearly at an end, so there shouldn't be more overspend coming through at the moment. The department are relatively optimistic that can actually bring the cost down a little bit, so that should help take the pressure off the advanced design. And similarly, they're hopeful to get a bit more from the Section 106, but nothing specific at this stage.
Okay, Mr. Bill.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I should have raised this on the previous session, but council tax and business rates coming in from the districts. I sit on the appropriate committee at district level, and I can report that what's happening is that council tax is coming in quite well. People are finding that money, and they are paying it. There might be a problem with the businesses, as indicated, but I think people across the county are to be congratulated by ensuring that their council tax debts are being met. Could it just, you might regard this as a slightly facetious remark, but on page 58 there's a reference there to the Hinckley hub, and I wasn't going to comment on this, but I can see there's a reference there to trial holes, and I do wonder about that. You see, it must have been about 20 years ago when the previous building was put on that site. We were the powers that be said, yes, there's no problem with that. We can build on that site. But some of us who have got long memories knew that there'd been a chemical works there called Amoa Chemicals, and what that firm did is it buried its canisters of chemicals in their own grounds, and we warned the people developing that site that, well, when it's not going to be an easy job, but all our warnings were dismissed, of course, because we didn't know what we were talking about. And the next thing we had men in white coats working on the site for about a year. So it's just a note really to E&T and these trial holes. You might find stuff down there you're not expecting to find. I suppose it's really a case of being around so long. I know where the bodies are buried, but a little bit of knowledge there, information there might be of use to you.
David, I'd send them an email just to make sure you've covered that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Feltham.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Parochial, I'm afraid. I try not to, but this one's been standing on the list for so long. The Kidworth recycling site. Must be 5 years, I think, last time we were looking at this being upgraded, and it fell foul of Japanese knotweed and all sorts of things. I see it's now moved into the 2021-22 year, or we're now we are about to go into that. I just wondered if, Declan, you got any other idea of within that year time scale, because clearly there's going to be some disruption, and it'd be good to warn people not to use it for the next umpteen months whenever it occurs. I have written to Jo Gile, but she hasn't replied yet. Yeah.
I'm not aware of anything, to be honest. Joe's the right person to respond on that. My guess is that I'm not aware of them having, or I know they haven't appointed a contractor yet, so that sort of detailed timeline won't be set yet. But yeah, Joe should be the right person to talk to.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Einan.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at paragraph 60, is it 60 or 61? 60, second section, I think it is. Yeah. I was wondering if I could ask about the Section 106 money for Newbridge High School, which apparently isn't going to be used because Apollo want to lease a building. What happens to Section 106 monies in that case? Does that mean they're available for use elsewhere, or what happens?
It all tends to come down to the conditions in that agreement. So sometimes it'll say something fairly generally about kind of, I suppose schools in that sort of area. So then the team can look at sort of where it's best needed. But it is a difficult one if you obviously entered a Section 106 thinking it's going to be used in one way, and then it turns out something else. You do run the risk of losing it. But hopefully it is general enough that we can redirect it to other school places. And even if, I suppose, Apollo are leasing the building, it still may require at some point some sort of capital investments. You tend to have a 5-year period to spend monies as well. So you do have a bit more flexibility on that side.
So it's unlikely to be lost, we're thinking.
We haven't lost money on schools that I can think of, certainly not in recent sort of memory. So they do tend to be quite savvy about talking about areas as opposed to specific schools. So to touch wood, it's okay, but yeah, it's unlikely to be lost.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Fryer.
Thank you very much. My inquiry is on page 59, and it's regarding the Zosh bridge replacement, which seems to have been going on for an awful long time. And I might be wrong, but every time we get a report like this, there's always a slippage, or it's being re-evaluated, or there's extra cost. I just wonder if at some time the officers could give us an update, how long it's been going on, how much it's cost so far in total, and is there an end date in sight yet?
So Mrs. Fry is exactly right. It's a project that just it seems to have been in the capital programme for for an age, and I have to admit off the top of my head, I think it might be 2013 it first started out. So it has been in there a while, and it's been beset by kind of cost increases. Going back to those sort of early estimates, we're talking in the region of sort of £3 to £3.5 million, and the latest estimates are closer to sort of the £10 million mark, which brings a sort of deep intake of breath with it. Why is it sort of increased so much? And there's a whole litany of sort of different reasons of why this has happened to it. But the latest position that it's in, because of those sort of cost increases, the department had a bit more of a fundamental look about what you can do, and has anything changed in the kind of the construction techniques that allow a different approach to happen. So what's happening now is they think that sort of refurbishment as opposed to complete replacement techniques have improved enough that it's a kind of a viable option to consider. So over the summer, they're having some sort of surveys and studies done on the bridge to basically just see what could be done to try and mitigate some of those costs. So probably a good time is when the sort of in the autumn, I'd suggest just actually sort of come back with an update on that, because the department will be able to have more about actually what's the planned way forward on this one. I mean, probably on the positive side, they have spent money, and it's sort of significant money getting sort of planning permission and things like that, but it's probably likely things like that were needed anyway, just to do some of the options appraisals. But yeah, it is a scheme that's had a lot of problems.
Thank you. If I may, Chair, through you, is the bridge actually closed, or is it in use?
No, it's still in use. They do regular inspections with it, and it's kind of yeah.
So my supplementary would be, if this is going back to probably somewhere around 2013. I know we were discussing it when I came onto the council in 2017. Is it really necessary to have done all this work? Because
I think you're straying into sort of technical issues.
Yes, I appreciate that, but
would you like a note from the director on why this scheme is necessary?
That would be helpful, I think, because it has been going on and it's costing an awful lot of money.
Okay, we'll follow that up for you. Is that okay, Declan? I think it's getting a bit
yeah, no, that's fine. You're quite right. You've exhausted my knowledge of bridges.
Yeah. Okay. Lastly, Mr. Richardson, Terry.
Thank you, Chair. Mine sort of follows on from Kevin and Hillary's, really, so they've probably taken some of what I was going to ask, but mine was from a slightly different angle, in that some of these schemes have been on there for as long as I've been a county councillor, and therefore, what assessment do we do of the cost of not making decisions? So, you know, there is an ongoing cost of staff time looking at different schemes. You know, it may be, I suspect, we spent more money already than we would have spent if we'd done it 5 years ago. So what is the cost of not making decisions and ongoing schemes? And how do we look at the cost of that and the possible opportunity cost of not using that money elsewhere when we know a scheme's going to be delayed for several years? That's sort of my big concern, is these things just sit on there. And surely on that chart, there should be at some point of a final time when a decision's going to be made to do something or not do something, because otherwise it just rotates onwards, eating money and staff time ad infinitum.
Okay, I'm sure these things are kept under review in the programme.
No, I suppose that's right on a scheme by scheme basis. That is tend to as how it comes through. Obviously, you make your estimates and then you do your reassessments. And if it does, I suppose the delays, like the junction, the M1 junction sort of scheme that just mentioned, within that scheme, that extension costs the best part of £1 million just because the scheme got sort of elongated. And it does very much depend on when the problem hits. The Zoch isn't too bad because it's pre any construction, pre any contracts being let. So, you could have wasted money if you abandon the scheme altogether, although that's unlikely, but it's more where the scheme's live and on site, and then we do tend to report them back. We haven't done an overall review of the programme itself in terms to identify that, which may be more what you're getting at, is a bit more of a fundamental problem that we're missing by just looking at scheme by scheme. So we can have a bit of a look back over. My suspicion is the thing that I suppose as finance we push at the departments more is just stop being so optimistic, and it's people that tend to over program into the capital program, so it comes in probably a year before it needs to, and then people get worried about if they don't get a scheme in now, it's they're never going to get it. So I think it's more that over program optimism before the construction starts. So the cost is either nothing or relatively small, as opposed to actually within the scheme itself. But we can have a bit of a look back over and see what we can pick back up. Yeah.
There you go, Terry. There's a commitment to do a bit of work.
Right. If I may just come back on that, Chairman, because the other point on that one as well is that I asked a question on the Zooch Bridge, I think it must be 2 or 3 years ago, because this is one where it's on a shared border. And I asked how many bridges where we had got agreement with the party on the other side of the bridge as to who was responsible for the bridge. And we originally got told one, and then subsequently in written answer, I think we found there were 5 or 6 bridges. And therefore, do we then reevaluate with those partner counties, the other side, where you have a material huge increase, about the fairness of that apportionment between who looks after which bridge?
And the quick answer is no. The agreement goes back decades, really is stuck in the annals of time. So I know Anne had been, a similar question had come up from a different avenue, Anne had responded to that on the basis of actually sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and she's aware of bridges in Derbyshire, etc., who've had equally horrendous impacts. So unfortunately not. It'd be too hard to unpick it now.
Okay. Now, just got Anthony Cross on a legal point. Is there anything
Chairman, can I just add to it, please?
Hang on, because Anthony had indicated a while ago on the Section 106 issue.
Yes, morning, Chair. Just to thank Declan for his response about the Section 106 issue in terms of what happens when there's an issue about the wording. Very grateful to him. Yeah, we'll look at the wording to make sure it's not lost, but Declan is right. The wording used in agreements is designed to ensure that we're given some appropriate wriggle room. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Now, Rosita, what did you want to come back on?
Thank you. It was actually previously when Declan replied to my question on Leaders Farm, and since that it took a life on where Hilary mentioned her shortcomings, and I agree with Terry's. And so when we're looking at these endless investments, for instance, again, I use Leaders Farm, we are talking changes of schemes, endless investments, additional financial support. So how do we then, at the end of the day, ensure that it is still best value for money and that we still getting the yield which we actually focused on in our original capital investment?
Okay,
so hang on. Declan just said it might be worth looking at that. So I fully support having a look at all of these schemes which have had several investments, etc. So could we add Leaders Farm onto that and have a look at this? But then also to add to it, is it maybe worth putting a timeline on these schemes? So if you've had it laying there for a year or two and you haven't got a capital investment, but you keep throwing money into that, so is it maybe worth putting a timeline onto these things, how long we leave it onto the scheme? And with that, thank you.
So what he's agreed to do is to go away and have a look at the programme and look at those schemes that have been around a long time and look at what the issues are. And then I think what you're suggesting is that when we next have one of these reports, Declan pulls out the ones, obviously you want to look at Leaders Farm, highlight those and give us a bit of a narrative around what the issues are, what the delays are, and what further justification does it need to be reviewed.
Yes, and maybe in future putting in internally a timeline on these schemes. So if you've got
trigger.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. All right. Are you happy with that, Declan? To have a look at that?
Yeah, we can have a look at that. Yeah.
The next monitoring report you bring us, just pull out the ones.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think we've done this a good report. Thank you very much for this update. You'll no doubt bring us another one at the right time, but obviously we've been to the next financial year. Can I thank those officers for presenting this morning? The date of our next meeting is the 14th of April. That will be our last meeting of this council 4 years. And we'll be starting at 10:30. I think there'll be quite a few items on the agenda, so it may go on into the afternoon, but the officers will advise us of that closer to the time. So thank you very much for attending this morning, and I'll close the meeting at 11:42.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chair.
Bye. Stay safe.
Thank you, officers.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. Bye.